Wanted to point out we'd take an
He's here.
opportunity. Yeah, we've got the prodigal host has returned to the studio. Forrest Anderson has been out there testing the roads and making sure that they're safe for driving this morning, right?
Oh, it's fabulous between Merton Twin this morning, let me tell you. I would caution everyone, if you don't have to be somewhere today, don't go this morning because the roads are pretty icy and pretty gnarly, especially in the rural areas.
And he's also got like Yukon Cornelius's hat on today, so he's dressed for the weather as well as everybody else should be. Yeah, that's the other part of this. You get stranded in this, you better be ready for it. Just to let people know. And of course, Todd Eccles joining us too. Todd from Patriot Defense, and Forrest is here from Washington Street Pawn. And we talk on Friday mornings. We talk about firearms. And right off the top, I just wanted to mention we talked about this. I think in the first hour, I made a couple of mentions of it. This has come up before, but it's being revived again. A discussion about a nationwide concealed carry. In other words, where if basically everybody else is going to honor everybody else's permits and the like, and that uh, it's been stalled a couple of times. I know it's been proposed in the past, but are we looking at maybe a different playing field here, or how would we get California to go along? I guess is the big question.
I don't know. I think that's the big question. I think it's got a little bit better shot this year. I think they've tried it twice in the past. And what it is, it's the concealed carry reciprocity law. And so it states that you do have to have a concealed carry permit, but as long as you have your concealed carry permit from your home state, that all the other states would honor it. It'd be like a driver's license. The only thing that you'd have to be aware of is that you'd have to follow each state's gun laws or restrictions might be a little different, so you'd actually have to follow those. As far as getting California and some of those other states on board, I don't know. I mean, I think we're looking a little bit better this year just because this time because of Trump. He's probably going to be a little more open to it, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. Your guess is as good as mine, Bill.
And Forrest, you sent me a map. I know some weeks ago. It's the actual map of the country, but it's got multiple different colors on it because there's different levels of reciprocity. Some places don't have it at all. But it's if somebody who's going to be doing some traveling needs to know this because before you go, you don't
You
want to end up sitting in a jail somewhere.
you absolutely do. There are several cases on the East Coast because on the East Coast it's pretty spotty up and down, and there's people that travel from Florida and New York,
Hmm.
and maybe they're just crossing in between states. They don't even tend to stop in that state, but they've got their concealed weapon on. They get pulled over, and I think it was the state of Massachusetts actually where the state police were actually looking for license plates from other states and pulling them over and then searching their cars. And there's been some court stuff about that because they were waiting to catch people with concealed weapons. Um, Now is the time to get this done. I mean, I hope that the people that voted this election don't sit on their hands now because there is a 2 year window. Actually, there's probably a 1 year window to get anything done because when midterm elections come up, it could shift the balance of power in the House and in the Senate. Yes, you have a Republican president for the next 4 years, but you have both houses and the presidency, and so they really have to jam a lot of legislation through. And so, if something needs done, you need to be on the phone with your representatives, having them push some of these issues. Another issue is a nationwide taking suppressors off the NFA list, so you can have a suppressed weapon without having to get a tax stamp. It really doesn't, in this day and age, it doesn't make any sense. In Europe, you can't shoot without a suppressor just about on a public range because it's noise pollution.
Hmm.
It's
Um,
called the Safe Hearing Act. Is
yeah,
that?
the Safe Hearing Act, and that would be another great thing to get pushed through. But we're going to have to be on our representatives because I think last time the Republicans told us, "Hey, you get us elected, we'll repeal this, and we'll do that," and they went the other way. They kind of just cowed down, and why they do that, I don't know. The other side does not do that. They just ram through whatever they're going to get done. So it's time to return the favor, but we need to be pushing them. We need to be on the phones. We need to be writing letters saying, "Hey, there's no excuse you can't get it something done. Get it done now."
And I would think too, and throw this one out to both of you, is that and you see what we've done here, even though obviously you'd still need that enhanced permit. What we've done in Idaho, we've really opened up what we do. I mean, we've opened up the gun laws with the concealed carry and the like, and there's been no change. And I think that that's a if they're looking for like a test case of how gun ownership works and gun rights work, all of the warnings that it would be the lawless Wild West here never materialized.
To be honest with you, I think it has changed, but it's changed for a good in a good way because there's a lot more people now. This law was real public when it went through. A lot more people are wanting to conceal carry handguns now. But they're actually, I think you got more people searching out the class that they aren't required to take if unless they want to leave the state. They want that education. They want the safety. And I mean, that's what I've seen anyhow. I don't know about you, Forrest, but
Yeah, the legal portion especially, people want to know.
hmm
Now that you've taken on that responsibility to carry a gun, I'm really proud of people for taking the initiative and learning the do's and don'ts and learning some handgun handling, safety. Um, that's what I was worried about. I think that's what everybody was apprehensive about is people are just going to blow out there and they've never carried a gun, never shot a gun, they don't know how to operate it, but they're going to strap it on and cruise out into public. But for the most part, people have acted very responsibly with that.
You know what it is? It's a difference of opinion about some people think that the public is generally good, and other people think the public is generally bad and needs to somehow be controlled. And so we're still having, I guess, that battle, even though our founding fathers said people are generally good. That battle goes back and forth, it seems. And this is, as you said, this is an opportunity while the iron is hot to pretty much say, let's do this now. And we do have good examples of how things can work. And you know what I remember years ago? There was a huge storm that hit back east, and in some of these big cities around Washington, Baltimore, and places, all the traffic lights went out. What they discovered was people would come up to the traffic lights, and then without anybody there giving directions, they would use them as four-way stops. They did this on their own. I mean, no one had to tell them, and they weren't racing through and trying to beat other people through the intersection. And if you're looking for an example of how people will behave, there you go. And I guess that's a plus if you're making the argument this is a good idea to just allow people to do this nationwide and move on.
I'd like to think that if people aren't regulated or forced to make a choice or have something forced upon them, that when they're left to their own devices, they'll make the right choice. And to a certain extent, that's kind of what I'm seeing as far as people wanting to learn the law and be safe and do it correctly.
And it comes down to enforcement, really. If you punish the offenders in the state of California, you see a big trend of, I'm going to punish the 95% of people doing it right because 5% aren't doing it right. What you need to do is make crimes with firearms, make those punishments very, very stiff. You rob a bank with a firearm, you commit a crime with a firearm, make it a 25-year minimum sentence. Then people are going to think about that. And if they don't think about it, they'll be off the streets for a long time for committing that crime. And don't punish the people who are doing it correctly. Punish the people who are breaking the law.
We have a telephone caller with us, and we'll go to the caller in just a moment. I do want to point out we'll remedy that situation in a moment. For us, just we seem to be a headset short, but what I'll do is I'll just allow the external speakers to play the question for us. And want to mention it's 9:15 right now. It's 32. Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense in studio with me, Bill Colley on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. Caller, you're up next. What's your question?
Good morning, guys. It was perfect timing. You was talking about California. My son's working down there, and the other 2 days ago, he was mugged. He was in a place that he'd been 100 times, but it was dark. And what they're doing in California is penalizing, like you said, the 95%. Thank God he had a belt buckle with a knife in it, and he just come up swinging. They hit him in the back of the neck with a pipe or something. But it's too bad when they let the bad guys carry the weapons and the good guys can't. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
And that really is the problem. The people who are breaking the law, who are carrying guns and aren't supposed to, they're already breaking the law. Law does not matter to them because they're breaking it anyway. So the only people who are being hurt by this are the people who are doing it right, the people that follow the law. So now you got a bunch of criminals who aren't allowed to carry guns anyway. They're going to carry guns. They don't. That doesn't matter to them. The law doesn't matter to them. And then you've got a bunch of helpless, law-abiding people who now can't defend themselves. I was reading about the Shal may issue. In California, if you want a concealed carry permit, you have to prove to them some reason why you need one. And what they're saying is, I read one of the lawmakers had stated, well, the odds of you actually needing one to defend yourself are very small. So, you can just call the police. And it's really not their right to dictate who gets to defend themselves and who doesn't get to defend themselves. So I, I hope that, nationwide reciprocity would be awesome. And if they pass on a federal level, the states will have to honor it.
Yeah.
But getting there is going to be a is going to be a road.
Yeah, there'll definitely be some opposition, and I wanted to point out you brought something up. I think a couple of weeks ago I saw a story out of the New York Times, which has not been friendly to gun rights from an editorial position. They decided to look into shootings last year, calendar year, where there were what they call mass, which I guess means four or more people who were shot, and they discovered that very few of these involved anybody who'd gone through legally obtaining a firearm. In other words, the criminals are going to do whatever they can, no matter what the law is. And it was an admission on their part that indeed the laws aren't going to stop anyone who wants to commit a crime.
Yeah, and the only way to do that is take every gun in the country, which is never going to happen, especially with this administration. Like I said, we have a real window here. But if you were anxious before the election, now is the time to turn up the heat on our lawmakers because we know how those guys love to get to Washington and disappear. They're not in their home state. They're not campaigning. They don't have to worry about it for 4 to 6 years. So they love to get back there, start playing golf and drinking coffee and wait until the next election cycle. We need to turn up the heat. If you were on them before, you need to double your efforts now because they have the presidency, they have both houses of Congress. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to get anything they want to get done.
And we got to keep in mind because we hear the word lobbyist thrown around and it's a bad word often, but every time you call the office of one of your senators or congressmen, every time you do that or you write a letter or send an email, you're lobbying them. And so the more people that do that, the more of an
Well,
impression we make.
well,
Yeah.
what's a politician's main goal? Re-election.
Yeah.
I mean, they're out there to secure their paycheck just like anybody who goes to work every day is. So they're going to do what people demand. And if people say, look, get this done or we'll find somebody else who will, that's the great thing about politicians is we have an opportunity to hold them accountable. So let's hold them accountable. Get on the phones, write some letters. Let's turn up the heat, double whatever we did before the election.
We have more coming up with Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense and Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn. We're talking firearms this morning. And Bill Cowley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. And some of your telephone calls on the way too. 736-0300. Anything you want to know about firearms, trust me, these two guys know a lot more than I do. Now's the time to call. Joining us in the studio, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, and of course, Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, just a few blocks away from our studios. Bill Cowley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. It's 33. Coming up on 9:23, and just a quick note, I just want to remind people if you're hearing the program today, we thank you, but if you're struggling to hear it, you need to get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology. She's at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert, and she'd like to open your world to new sounds and experiences. She is actually working with a new hearing device which helps the brain with hearing loss, and you can hear more naturally when you have this, and you can get a 2-week free trial. So if you need to check that out, call her office today. That's Dr. Christine Pickup in Rupert. And the telephone number is 312-0957. That's 312-0957. We were just talking during the off-air break, and of course I'll point out too if you've got a question or comment on anything related to firearms, give us a call at 736-0300. But Forrest mentioned that this time of year, because first of all, we think a lot more about charitable causes this time of year just because we see a lot more of it or we realize the need a lot more. And for people who actually are involved in the, maybe call it the gun industry, the firearms industry, or even any aspect of it, this is the time of year where you might think about giving a little back.
I think really one point I want to touch on is, and if you're a hunter, if you hunted ducks or geese or any kind of game like that, when you're hunting and they call flock shooting. If you just kind of point your gun and pull the trigger and hope something good happens, generally that result is poor. But if you pick out a bird and take aim, you'll generally have better success. And to make an analogy to tie that to charity this time of year, pick something, pick a family, pick a charity, and actually go do something. If you're just kind of like throwing some money in the wind and hoping it goes to the right place, that generally doesn't work. Personalize that. You know, the as gun owners, we need to do all we can to help our cause, and there's nothing that helps our cause better than being out there in the community doing things. So
People
pick a
get to know you
person,
that way.
yeah, pick a person, pick a cause, pick an organization, and actually go spend some time. Like we at Washington Street Pond have adopted a little family, a single mom, 3 kids, working, just barely getting by. I mean, and when I say barely, like the basic everyday stuff that we take for granted, having struggles, and actually has a child that lives out of state with his dad. Hadn't seen him in a year and a half because she doesn't have money to drive. You'd think driving 400 miles would be no big deal, but when you don't have a reliable car and you don't have gas money to get there, if you can imagine having a child and not being able to see them because you can't afford to drive there to see them. So we at Washington Street Pond have adopted that cause. And we would encourage anyone listening today to come in. If you've got $5 extra in your pocket or 10, we would love to make a great Christmas for that. And we'd love for you to join in with us because we can do so much, but it's a tight year for everybody. We're loaning money more so than we've ever loaned in all the years I've been there. People are struggling this year. So if you want to jump on board with us, we'd love to have you. If you've got something specific on your own, go do it. But if you've got an extra couple bucks in your pocket, a 20, a 50, a 5, come throw it in the jar. We'd love to have you help us with that great cause.
You bring that up, and I think a lot of opposition. Well, tell you what we'll do. We'll take a call first, but I got a thought about that, about getting involved in some of the opposition to some of the gun issues around the country. We'll hold on to that for a couple of minutes. In the meantime, we have a caller with us, and it's 9:26. We'll call it, and I've got 34 at our studios. Caller, you're up next. What's your comment or question?
Oh, good morning. I wanted to compliment you guys. What a good show this morning. Good topics, good discussion. Um, you know, you mentioned, we're punishing the good guys and kind of letting the bad guys go. I think you guys are onto something there. I think we really do need to work on getting some laws that will definitely punish anybody that is going to do a crime. You commit a crime, you should be in trouble, and that should be a deterrent from actually committing it. When we were talking, you guys were talking a little bit early, I think that there was kind of a misunderstanding on a lot of people's parts of the situation. You mentioned that the different lawmakers and things were saying that, well, maybe just call the police or something like that. What I mean by a misunderstanding of that situation is, basically when seconds count, the police are very good, but they're still, just minutes away. And if you've ever been in a situation like that where your life is on the line, you're being threatened, with deadly force by a criminal, seconds are an eternity, and it may only be just a few minutes to get the police there, but like I say, that's an eternity, and it just doesn't really work very good for you to be defenseless and not be able to take care of the situation there, because let's face it, if you're already there, you're the first responder.
Oh, that's well said. That last couple of comments there about being first responder individually.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're the one. You're the one that's there. You're the one that has to deal with it. And like I said, a lot can happen in minutes. When seconds count, they're minutes away, and that's not. I'm not talking bad about law enforcement at all. They have to do their job, but they around here, especially a rural area, if you live, outside in the county, they've got a huge area to cover, and it's you until they get there. And you gotta have options, and having a gun is a good option.
One of my favorite quotes is off Top Gun, when very last scene of the movie, they're having the fight, and there's only 2 fighters up there, and the admiral of the ship says, "Hey, launch the other fighters." And they said, "The catapult's down, it'll be 10 minutes." And he's like, "This thing will be over in 2 minutes." Same thing in a self-defense situation. The police are fabulous. We love them. We have them in our shop all the time. Some of my really good friends, those guys out there working hard. But if they're across town, it's going to take I mean, physics are, it's going to take them a minute to get there. So being smart, being prepared, being trained by Patriot Defense, having a good firearm, you can do a lot of good for yourself.
We've got more coming up in just a few minutes, and all the phone lines are going. We'll take more of your telephone calls. Be patient. That's on the way. We've got 9:30. Joining me in studio, Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story. It's 33. Hope you can stick around. We're talking firearms this morning. Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense and Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pawn. And hey, quickly, we need to ask you guys about your contact information in case people want to get. You've got a course coming up soon, I would imagine.
I do. I've actually I've got one on the 17th, so that'd be not this Saturday, but the next Saturday. I still got a few spots left in there, and I just announced on Facebook I've got another one on January 7th. Again, that's January 7th and December 17th. Get a hold of me. My number is area code 620-794-6223. You can find me on Patriot Defense on Facebook. And just for those of you that have signed up for my December 17th class, I may be getting hold of you real quick because we may actually change the location of the class. But don't do anything. If you don't hear from me, don't worry about it. But I may be getting hold of you because we may be moving the classroom portion to my house where there's some good heaters.
And just one more time, what's the number?
Area code 620-794-6223. I'm trying to slow that down.
Yeah, well, just a couple of times helps people. And Forrest for Washington Street Pawn.
Washington Street Pawn. We're right here on Washington, right across the street from Platt Electric by the old Wonder Bread store, 321 Washington Street, 208-735-0012. You can find us on Facebook under Washington Street Pawn. Send us a message, give us a call. Some great deals right now. I mean, AR-15s, brand new AR-15s are going for $525. So if you've been wanting one, all those speculators bought up a bunch and now they're stuck with them. So they're trying to dump them now. So come down and see us. We'll get you a great deal on one of those.
I got to mention something. We had an email from a fellow during the break who was explaining that he actually got to talk to Jim Risch in Washington a short while ago. And he says that Risch expressed that he does not hear enough from people in the state and sometimes just small pockets and the like. And it echoes something I heard as well. When we had the vote on concealed carry last year in the state legislature, Maxine Bell was criticized for not voting for the change, but she told me as well. She said I had just two people reach out to me, and they were both opposed. So she heard no other voices. So a lot of the people who are actually serving in public office, this is now. So we've got somebody at the state level and we've got somebody at the federal level, both saying they don't hear enough from us. So they're looking for that feedback. They're not getting it.
Yeah, and I think we take for granted the fact that they've got. I mean, they're 3,000 miles away. You know, they don't have their pulse on the heartbeat of what's going on here. They're worried about national issues and stuff, but they really need to be concerned about us. We have legislation that we want passed for us. We have legislation on a national level that fits our best interests as a state. Get on the phone. Like I said, if we're going to get something done, it's going to be this year. And they have no reason not to get it done. Both houses and the presidency, they should be shoving stuff through like crazy.
We could see a pretty busy first 100 days, but again, we have to have that input. And in the internet age, it's fairly simple to do that. It's a lot easier than it was when I was a kid. 30 years ago, when I wanted to write a letter, I had to sit down and or get out the old typewriter and change the ribbons or whatever else. Today, it's just a quick note on the internet. Sometimes we got to point out a couple of things. When Forrest mentioned the price of firearms, a lot of people this time of year, and we go back to this all the time. We get a lot of questions, and we did the last couple of weeks especially. They're going to be asking, yeah, but what's the best for me? Now, I like the looks of an AR. I'm going to tell you right now, I mean, the thing looks so sharp. But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily meet any uses that I have that I'm aware of at the moment. So unless you're a collector, people are going to come into the shop, and how do you deal with that? And maybe too from a training aspect, we'll get to that too.
Just find what fits your needs. The more I shoot my AR-15, the more I find it's a multi-purpose rifle. I mean, you can deer hunt with it, you can varmint hunt with it, you can coyote hunt with it, you can great home defense weapon.
Mm-hmm. Simple use, right?
Yeah, if you put the right ammunition in it, makes a great home defense weapon. And there's a reason why they issue why our military doesn't run around with handguns, because in a defense situation, if you're up against a handgun and you've got a carbine of some sort, you have an advantage immediately. You can see that in competition. Now they're having pistol caliber carbines allowed to shoot with the handguns, and they've immediately stepped right up to the top of the ranks. Guys grabbing those off the shelf who were okay shooters with a handgun, now they're rocking with a carbine, because you've got 4 points of contact. You've got your both hands, your shoulder, and your cheek. It's just going to be steady, and it's going to be accurate. So
I want to ask, and we've got only a few seconds before the break coming up, but I want to ask Todd about this and training too, as well, after the break, because a lot of people, well, training with a handgun, we do pistols and revolvers because they're easy to, again, conceal, and you can carry them a little bit more simply than you can sometimes an AR-15 around with you when you're just doing your business. But I wanted to ask too about maybe training with long guns when we get into the next segment, because there's going to be some differences, I'm sure, and some things that people need to know. We've got that on the way, though. In just a few minutes, we have another break ahead. Joining us this morning, Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pond and Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 9:40, and we've got 34. Joining me in studio, we've got Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, as well as Forrest Anderson from Washington Street Pond. Bill Colley with you as well. It's 35 right now, coming up on 9:44. And you're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Before we get to the question I was posing to Todd a few minutes ago, both of these two will take a crack at that. No pun intended there. That's the sound of the report. That's all. We've got a caller with us, and I wanted to mention, caller, you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yes, I have, I guess, a question for Forrest, and this is kind of not related to what we're talking about, but it kind of is. I'm a Hagerman resident. We have a major controversy going on in that town, and it involves Shaw shooting. John Shaw and Houston Shaw have a major, I guess, shooting range down there in Hagerman, and it's within 3/4 of a mile from the city limits. They shoot calibers, .223 caliber, a lot of 9mm pistols in that range, and the distance that caliber flies is 2 miles. It puts the whole town of Hagerman at risk, and I see where Forrest is one of the people that is an advocate of that range. Houston Shaw is applying for an advanced kind of tactical shooting range that's going to involve about another 30, 40 acres. It puts a 1/4 mile close to Hagerman. Hagerman is in uproar. They passed a resolution against this, but yet John Shaw and Houston Shaw are trying to push this through the Gooding County, and it's, it really puts the entire town of Hagerman at risk. And I want to know what Forrest thinks about this. None of us feel, I'm a member of a Hagerman or Citizen for Hagerman group that's over 250 people opposing this enhanced firearms training down there. And
well, tell you what, we'll get then to we got all the history of it. We'll get to the reaction from Forrest.
The range has already been approved, and there hasn't been any accidents out there. They're one of the #1 training schools in the world. They have Mid-South shooting in Mississippi, and they have this school in Hagerman. They're training the world's best. They're training the world's most elite combat troops from this country to go out and defend our freedoms. I would be privileged to have that school half a mile away from me. If you look at it, you can hunt deer with any pistol caliber right up to the city limits of Hagerman. How far do you want to take it? How many more? You can't own the entire county. You can't dictate what people do on their own property. This has already been permitted. The city of Hagerman had a chance when they first established this, and they all got behind it. They're expanding the range to give better training to, like I said, the guys out defending our freedoms. The reason John got into the
training business for the military is he ran into a Marine in an airport. The Marine was in a wheelchair. He asked him what happened. He said he came around a corner in combat. There was him and an enemy combatant. They were both out of ammunition. They both had to reload their guns. The enemy combatant reloaded his guns, shot him, and paralyzed him before he could get his gun loaded. That was one thing that really inspired him to, our troops need better training. We can't send these men and women into combat without the proper training. So we need the best people training them in the best facilities. This is a world-class facility, and they're the best people training that kind of combat training in a business. Why wouldn't we give them the best? You know, I know it's always not in my backyard. One of my favorite quotes is, what's the difference between a developer and a environmentalist? A developer or an environmentalist already got his house built, right? I've got my place now. I don't want anybody else to do anything else. And that's kind of the attitude going around. And Hagerman might, the statement, Hagerman's in an uproar. I know there's a ton of people down there and a ton of people in Gooding County to support this as well.
Good for the economy. Can I add something to that? I want to thank the caller for at least chiming in on this. You gave me a tour of the same facility that we're talking about. And the one thing that I noticed, in order for an errant shot to get out of there and harm anybody, it would have to go around a couple of corners and then maybe up into the sky for a time and then dip back down. And that doesn't happen. There's, what do they call it, physics? Because there are berms everywhere, and those berms protect against anything like that happening. And nobody is shooting in the direction of the actual downtown. So that end of it seems to me to be, unless you're actually trespassing out there, then you might be in some danger. But you know, there are laws against that, and I guess maybe somebody can't obey those, right?
Yeah, and we live in a rural community. I mean, that's the basics. Like, you could hunt in Hagerman right up to the city limits with a handgun. You can big game hunt down there with a shotgun, with a slug, or with a handgun. So they're, like I said, they're training the world's best out there. We owe it to our men and women in uniform to give them a place like that. And why not have it here? Why would we want to send them someplace else? Why not train them right here? Because, man, I'd love to have those guys come back here and retire. And it also brings tons of money into that community. You know, they eat there, they stay in the hotels there, you know, they frequent those businesses. And for a small town, that's a great thing. And I realize there's a little noise involved. You know, you're going to hear some gunshots, but, you know, in hunting season, all the duck hunters down there, you hear it all the time. John,
You get used to it. I live, just a few blocks from a club here in Twin Falls, and when they're out there shooting the clay pigeons, I guess, or whatever they're shooting, Sunday afternoon, you get used to it. It's just it's a background noise. My television's noisier.
yeah, and it's just, like I said, it's just that thing. Agree, disagree doesn't mean that maybe this guy doesn't enjoy the sound of gunshots every now and again. But bottom line is, if you weigh it all out, what they're doing down there is fabulous. No one's in the town of Hagerman has I guarantee there's been more people injured in car accidents in the town of Hagerman, and more damage done to the town of Hagerman from car accidents and pedestrians than there has been from that range. So if you really want to address the issue, address the issue. Make people so they can't drive their car anymore. You know, that'll make Hagerman safer than shutting down that range.
About 10 minutes from 10 o'clock, and we have another caller we're going to squeeze in here. It's 33 at KLIX. Caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, I called in a minute ago, and I just like to, I guess, discuss a couple of points.
Well, you know what? It's not the Shaw Shooting Show today. It's actually a show about just guns and models and training and all. But I do want to thank you for chiming in. And we just spent the last 7 minutes on the topic, and I'd like to at least get back to some of the agenda too as well. And perhaps we can open it up for another day. But since it's already been approved, I don't know that there's a whole lot of discussion any longer other than sour grapes. 9:51 now. Bill Colley with you, of course, on Top Story, and my guests in studio, Todd Eccles from Patriot Defense, and, of course, Forrest Anderson joining us from Washington Street Pawn. We were talking just before the break, and I did want to get back to this. Long guns versus training with pistols or revolvers. There are some differences, obviously.
Well, there are some differences, but there's also a lot of stuff that's the same. I mean, you still have to have trigger control. You still have to, learn how to press that trigger. You still have to have stance. The stance is obviously going to be a little different, but there's the fundamentals that are there. Okay, you got to have your stance, your trigger control, your sight picture. They're just a little different from one to the other, but you still have to have those. You have to know all those things before you can start to walk or run. You have to crawl before you can walk. You have to walk before you can run. Um, as far as rifle classes, Patriot Defense, we don't do those quite yet. When we're in the handgun, we're the handgun guys, the handgun people. Eventually, in the future, I would like to get into something like that, but that's just a little ways down the road. I
And
gotta,
you need an entirely different type of facility, I would imagine.
yeah. Right now, I use an indoor range, and it's only set up for handguns, not even Magnum calibers. So I got to have a little bit better facility. As far as an outside range would be fantastic. I just got to get something figured out and something set up. That's in the plans in the future, but that's something I gotta get put together. But Forrest might be able to touch a little more on rifles. Yeah, I
Mhm.
think you're more of an AR guy than I am, aren't you?
Yeah, we've taken a lot of classes and a lot of classes down at Shaw Shooting, and I can tell you down there, safety is number one. If you've ever taken that class, like that is the most safety oriented class I've ever taken in my life. But it's basically the same thing, muzzle awareness, trigger press, sight picture. Those things are the same. Your magazine reloads. If you've trained with your handgun correctly, you're gonna set up your reloads the same way for your long gun, and it basically comes down to just be safe. You know, no matter what you're gonna do. I know people that carry an AR-15 in their car just in case. But here's the thing: you got to bring that thing in at night, every night.
Yeah.
If you have a gun and it's not being utilized, lock it up. If you want to keep your handgun or your AR-15 on your nightstand or leaning against your wall by your bed at night or your shotgun, that's great. But if you're not going to be there, lock it up. Don't leave it in your car. So many people come in. My gun got stolen in my car last night.
And it seems like there's a bunch of car thefts and what going on just lately. And I don't know if it's because of holiday season or what, but I've heard of just two or three in the last week.
Don't
Uh,
arm the bad guys.
yeah, I mean, I heard a gal got her car stolen and all her Christmas presents she bought for a kid. She took them in and they were in her car, and so all that's gone. Her car's gone and her Christmas for her kids is gone. So imagine if you left your gun in there.
We want to point out too that if you have a range for rifle versus a handgun, I saw Ted Cruz doing a video about a year ago where he was actually test firing a machine gun on an indoor range. But my gosh, just because of what you're using as ammunition, you need more space, a lot more space, and you're going to need some much more heavily reinforced walls in a situation like that too.
Yeah, more space, more backstop, more all kinds of stuff. Your safety barrier needs to be a lot bigger. Those rifles will shoot a lot further than a handgun will. So
And also too, what you may be using. In his case, he was cooking bacon around the barrel, because there's some other safety issues too here. Some of these firearms that you may be testing, you don't want to grab that barrel afterwards because there's it's not just having somebody making a mistake and shooting off their toes. It's some of these other things too that can be a hazard as well.
Yeah, I've got a nice big scar on my calf from my suppressor on my AR-15. Had it slung, let it swing down. It sat against my calf. I was wearing shorts, so I've got a permanent scar there. So, yeah, you want to be safe, but the other thing is they're an amazing, you know, firearms in themselves when used correctly, when you have the proper training, are a ton of fun. I want to give a shout out to the Magic Valley Practical Shooting Association. Look it up on Facebook, Magic Valley Practical Shooting Association. If you can't remember that, call me at the shop, 735-0012. It's a great place. They shoot the first and third Saturdays. They're going to add the second Sunday of every month when the summer comes. They've got 3-gun shoots. They've got pistol shoots. It's only $50 for a membership, and you can go out there at your convenience. If they're not having a shoot, use their bays, use their targets, and it's a great thing to be a part of. And it's a great way to practice what you've learned from Todd at Patriot Defense on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. You can take what you learned there, and then you can use it in a real-world scenario where you're moving around barriers, you're doing reloads, you're doing things like that. So you actually can drill a little bit with the training that you've got.
Once again, Todd, if people want to take that training course, what's your telephone number?
telephone is area code 620-794-6223. You can call that or text message me. You can find me on Facebook under Patriot Defense. I'm always on there. You can
You,
say,
yeah, you know, one of the great thing about Facebook is you go there, you can just instant message. Same with Washington Street Pawn, send an instant message,
yep.
and sometimes it's easier to do that than the telephone call because you can see everything there and get all the details down and jot down when the actual course is taking place.
Yeah, and you'll see me. I was all over Facebook this morning. I was supposed to be working my other job, but anyhow, I put like numerous posts on Facebook about my class. I hope my boss didn't hear that. But I'm on there, so you can get a hold of me. You can find me anywhere. So
And again, Forrest, at Washington Street Pond, a couple of ways to get in touch.
Yeah, Facebook, Washington Street Pond, 208-735-0012. Stop by the shop. A gentleman called in earlier. If you want to talk about the range and concerns, then stop in, talk to me about
Right,
it.
right.
The other thing is charity. Get out there, do some good. If you want to help us with our little cause, we've kind of singled out an individual that we really want to help and make that Christmas something special. We'd love for people to stop in and throw 5, 10, 20 bucks in the jar and be able to provide them with an amazing Christmas. So,
Well, I want to thank the two of you. We'll see you again on next Friday, and we'll tee it up and do it all over again. I do want to point out on Monday and Tuesday, I have some business to take care of outside of the studio. So, Monday and Tuesday mornings, Twin Falls Mayor Sean Berriger is going to be here actually hosting the program. God willing, the creek don't rise, though. I'll be back Wednesday morning between 8 and 10 o'clock right here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.